Joo. Kiitos, jos tsekkaat. Right. Mitä? Okei. Täällä me ollaan ilmeisesti livenä. No niin, tässä testaillaan vielä, että toimiiko meidän kalustot. Ja sitten odottelemme päivän ekaa vierasta, eli Boyan Stanislavskia. Ammattimaisesti avaan tähän puhelimen, jolla voin seurata samalla chattia ylemmässä. Okei, äänet tulee kahdesti. Varmaan johtuu tästä mun setupista, missä tämä tapahtuu, jos mä avaan oman liveni tästä naaman eteen. Siellähän se on. Miltäs nyt vaikuttaa? Onko yhtään parempi äänen taso? Pitää vähän fiksaa tätä OBSin kapturointioptioita. Vaikuttaisiko nyt fiksummalta tästä hetkestä eteenpäin? Klik. Miltä se näyttää mulle itselleni? Vaikuttaisiko nyt fiksummalta tästä hetkestä eteenpäin? Klik. Eli tosiaan striimatessa pitäisi aina olla monta näyttöä. Nyt tää menee vähän tälleen. Joko mä pompin tässä omassa Okei, nyt meidän pitäisi kohta saada vieras tänne paikalle. Pitää vaan enää kutsua hänet mestoille. Näin. Sitten etsimme vielä yhden asian. Juontajana on keittänyt vähän ylivahvaa kahvia. Onneksi editissä voimme leikata nämä tästä sitten myöhemmin pois. Niin teille jää vain tämä kokonaisvaltainen itsekertomus. No mutta tässä kun odottelemme vieraamme saapumista, niin toivotan teidät kaikki tervetulleeksi tänne proletaarisen keskusteluohjelman pariin. Meikäläinen on Juho Tamminen, toimin juontajana tänään, eli ensin meillä olisi vuorossa Boyan Stanislavski, joka tulee kertomaan meille Bulgarian tilanteesta. Me julkaistiin nettisivuilla käännöstä Bulgarian tilanteeseen liittyvästä artikkelista. Se kannattaa mennä katsomaan. Se on myös linkitetty tuohon videon kuvaukseen alle. Ja nyt tänään sitten haastatellaan Boyania siitä, että mitä on tapahtunut artikkelin kirjoittamisen jälkeen, ja muutenkin ehkä saataisiin vähän lisää osviittaa siitä, että mitä Bulgariassa tapahtuu, koska siis sen maan tapahtumista ei ole hirveästi uutisoitu, varsinkaan täällä Koto-Suomessa, mutta muutenkaan ainakaan tälle meille länsi-eurooppalaisille näkyvissä medioissa hirveästi. Saatikka, että sitten uutisoitaisiin vasemmistolaisesta näkökulmasta, jota me toivon mukaan voitaisiin tänään vähän saada teille. Ja odottelen, että Boyan saa vaan auki linkin ja pääsee sitten linjoille, niin pääsemme jatkamaan. Jos pahoittelemme, että tässä nyt hieman kestää, mutta sellaista se on näinä aikoina. Tämä on aika tyypillistä vuodelle 2020. Ollaan moderneissa seansseissa, niin kuin siinä meemissä sanotaan. Sitten no, No, ei se mitään. Odotellaan. Ah,
Hey.
hello there. You made it.
Yeah. Okay. So, how's the sound and the picture?
Sound and the picture seems fine, yes. You're in a little bit of an angle there, but that's all right too. It's
You prefer it that way?
yeah, I think this is good. Yeah,
Okay. All right.
just that it doesn't cut your head off. It's good.
Okay.
Yeah.
So it's better maybe to lift it up like a couple of centimeters. Yeah. Hold on a sec. Just used. Yeah.
Right.
Okay. Now it should be fine.
Yeah, now it's a whole lot better. Yes.
Okay. So just make sure we recorded this time.
Yes. Yes. Now the technical difficulties should all be done away with, and yes, I'm sorry about last time. Anyway, yeah, thanks for being here. Let's start this stream without further ado. So, welcome viewers. I'm Juho Tamminen. I'll be your host today. This is a working class talk show hosted by Proletariat, and our guest here today is Boyan Stanislavski. Pleased to meet you here again, and glad that you could make it.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah. So, okay. So, if you start, can you introduce yourself in the beginning a bit?
Sure.
Tell us a bit about yourself.
Yeah, my name is Boyan. I'm Bulgarian by birth, internationalist by conviction, and I'm based in Poland. My field of interest is mostly Eastern Europe and like Eastern, Central, Southeastern, like east of the Elbe River, basically, the former Eastern Bloc, so-called. I work at a publishing house in Sofia, which was established which I established in 2016 with a couple of colleagues from Bulgaria and Romania, and we're publishing currently one media outlet in 3 languages, one could say, because our main one is in Bulgarian, and then we've got another website, which, well, I was first going to say that it's the Romanian version of it, but it's not the Romanian version. It's just a different website, although with same political profile, which is consistently left-wing one. And quite recently, a year ago, we started to develop an English language website for the international readers and for the international public opinion to get a sense of what is actually happening in Eastern Europe. Because our observation is that most people in the West, and I include Finland, I mean, not necessarily you, but in general, the public opinion doesn't really know what's going on here in this area, and looks at it through what I like to call Western glasses. And it's very easy to get the entire picture wrong then, because the social process, the cultural process are completely different, and they also have a very serious impact on the political one, which is like in the central point of our interests. So that's what we have been doing. Before that, I used to be I used to be an activist here in Poland, and I joined I became a left-wing activist in 1998, so quite a long time ago. And for the most part, I have been mostly linked to the institutional labor movement, to labor unions in Poland. And for a long period of time also, I have been their journalist and their reporter for their media. And then eventually in 2009, I became a publisher and editor-in-chief of their weekly magazine of one of the biggest trade union confederations here in Poland. Yeah, so I'm a journalist, an activist, and a business person at the same time. So that's pretty much what I can say about myself.
Right. That's very illuminating. Also, quite of a respectful career in activism. Career is always a dull word for that, but it's a respectable thing what you've done. But okay, let's get down to the topic at hand. So we published a translation of your article called "The Grotesque Decay of the Mafia-Owned State in Bulgaria and the Social Despair Accompanying It." So it's been a little over a week since we published it, and a little over 2 weeks since it was originally published. I believe it was 5th or something.
Yeah, it's almost a month. Right?
Yeah. So, any updates on the situation? How has the thing gone further now?
Well, no, not really. Not many updates in a sense that the demonstrations continue, which is a good thing. And well, in a sense, no news is good news. What I'm trying to say is that for me personally, my analysis is that what is crucial is that the protests continue until something happens, until there is some shift. Even if we cannot, if we don't manage to abolish this government, then at least to severely weaken it to a point that that the mobilized part of the society can perceive it as some kind of a visible, detectable victory. And of course, the protest continues with its two main demands, which is that the prime minister and the attorney general they have to go, and they have to go now. And I think that this is really the most important thing. The protests have to continue, and these two demands they have to keep being the central point of the protests and of the mobilizations. And I think it's admirable that things in a place like Bulgaria, I must say that even for me, for a person who's emotionally linked to that place and who's been observing the political processes and social processes there, it's kind of surprising. And that's why that's why I used this in my article. I referred to social despair because people are really despaired. I mean, Bulgaria is not really a place that you normally, Bulgaria is not France, or Bulgaria is not like Britain, where like places that you normally associate with massive, or Italy, right, for that matter, that you associate with mass movements, traditionally, demonstrating on the streets when things are going wrong for them, right? And Bulgarians are rather resilient, so to say, in terms of political culture, and this is why I feel there's a lot of mobilization that I admire, but there's a lot of despair behind it in a way. Had it not been for this desperate situation that we're in, like had it not been for this terrible disaster, had it not been for this catastrophe on all levels, like demographically, politically, economically, social, like whatever you want to look at it, it's a civilizational downgrade we're in right now. So had it not been for that, I don't think we would have managed to actually mobilize our to this extent. And I'm saying again, it's admirable. Like if I remember from the 5th or from the 9th of July, right? I'm sorry, I've got very bad memory for dates and for names too, by the way. But since that moment, people have been on the streets all the time, every day, day by day, Sunday, Saturday, Friday, giving up their parties, like late evening beer talks and so on and so forth, and just going there to protest massively to demand the two resignations, the one of Boyko Borisov, who is leading, like officially speaking, he's the prime minister of Bulgaria. Like unofficially speaking, he's really the Tsar of the internal political process because he controls pretty much everything, him and the oligarchic clique behind him. And one of his, executioners, so we could say like top executioners, the Ivan Geshev, the attorney general of Bulgaria. Right. Yeah, that's the situation. The situation continues to be severe. I mean, the civilizational downgrade continues, and the protests continue too. So hopefully, things are going to shift relatively soon because winter is coming, and I don't know how much determination people are going to find in themselves to protest for like next 3 months or something like that.
Right. So it's been over 100 days for now. The protests have been going on, and it's good to hear that they are still going on. And at the same time, it's kind of sad to hear that they haven't yet achieved any victory. So something. But let's go on to the
Well,
back.
sorry,
Yeah,
if I
so
just could interject for a while, I wouldn't say that they haven't achieved any victories, because I think that it's a victory in and of itself that they have that the society managed to mobilize itself to such an extent in such difficult conditions of such a hardship, which is unimaginable, believe me, for people from the West, or especially from the North, where you have this tradition of welfare state. And I know
Right.
it's been shrinked, right, severely, but still,
Yeah.
I mean, we're a far cry from any standard that you can imagine, right? Or
Yeah.
maybe not that you can imagine, but that you have experienced. So,
Right.
so there are some victories, but it's like we're waiting for the main thing we're fighting for the main thing to happen.
Yeah, that's actually a pretty good point. That the movement in itself is a kind of a victory, and I agree wholeheartedly. Yes, so let's talk a bit about the background of the situation, and then let's go back to the protests and the demands and so on. So about the Bulgarian oligarchy, you mentioned that the Tsar, as you call him, Boyko Borisov, is kind of running the show. Who else is? And you mentioned Ivan Gershov, and the article we translated and published mentions a lot of names. So can you tell us about?
That's right. Yeah, well, I'm not sure if I can,
I was.
kind of who is who in the Bulgarian mafia now.
Yeah, no, I meant like if you can give us a brief history of the Bulgarian oligarchy, like how it all came to be, and why are these people in power right now?
Right. So thanks for that question, because actually this is how you can try to start understanding the situation in Bulgaria and partially, in other countries in Eastern Europe. So the model of the transition, so to say, which I think it's just the soft word, the propaganda word for restoration of capitalism, really, in these countries. The model, well, not so much the model, but it was like the natural development of what of the events from 1989. I mean, looking back and in retrospect now, through the 30 years of the so-called transition, restoration of capitalism, it really appears to have been a natural development. I mean, today, I know people were very hopeful, including people like, I mean, the generation of my parents, okay, they were very hopeful about certain things because in 1989 they have quite justifiably protested against all kinds of inequalities, okay, the kind of misuse of power by the elites back then, and of course, like, it's a justifiable grief. And these are obviously reasons to protest. On the other hand, I must say that, when you look at Bulgaria today, where the inequalities are, like, I'm pretty sure Bulgaria, I don't have any statistics right in front of me at the moment to quote them, but Bulgaria is one of the most unequal countries in the world, most likely, alongside USA, Russia, I don't know, and probably South American and South African countries. So this is pretty much the third world. So if you look at that today, you will see that it was a process where the people that participated in all these public gatherings, mass meetings on the streets and so on and so forth, were actually used as the kind of masses who justified a kind of process that they never voted for, or they never were for, they never supported, they never advocated. Like back in 1989, I don't think if you had asked anyone who was participating in these meetings whether they want capitalism or this sort of capitalism that we have right now, in particular the kind of comprador post-colonial kind of thing, they would definitely say no. But this was a process that started in the Soviet Union. Okay, this was not something that I know that there is this legend that Poland and the shipyards and Lech Walesa and then the Berlin Wall, and yeah, of course, all these things did happen. But in fact, the decision to dismantle the Soviet Union and the Soviet sphere of influence, the Eastern Bloc, and so on and so forth, that all happened back in the 80s, like somewhere between Andropov and Gorbachev, most likely. And that's why the process went so smoothly, particularly in countries which were very deeply, very intensely linked to the Soviet Union. For example, Poland was a little less linked than Bulgaria, which was much more dependent, for example, from the point of view of raw materials, resources, and that kind of stuff. And on the other hand, it was also, the southern flank of the Warsaw Pact. So it had certain, it was appointed, well, not appointed, but it was assigned many important things to do, like develop high technologies, develop proper administration, strong secret services, strong army, and so on and so forth, which gave an immense civilizational boost to Bulgaria, which used to be like from the modern Bulgarian state that was established in late 19th century, was a peripheral state and mostly, peasant-oriented society ran by second-class kings from Russia or Germany. So that changed things completely, okay? And we became an industrialized, urbanized, and highly educated nation. The army, the standing army of 300,000 people. I don't know what other indicators I could give. Like, for example, back when my father was in the army, we had like more tanks than Greece and Turkey together, right? Like, because we were the southern flank of the Warsaw Pact, so we really had to have it. We had technologies that were only available in Japan and the Silicon Valley. We had our astronauts who were, sent to space to explore cosmos through, of course, through Soviet infrastructure. We had a fantastic agriculture. We competed with the United States. We even were better than them for 1 year. I think in 1986, we exceeded the United States in terms of export of tobacco. Like, can you even imagine that? Like, such a small country exceeding such an empire in terms of tobacco production, right? Like United States. And then for, I don't know, years, I think 10 years or maybe 15, we were the top exporter in the world of paprikas and tomatoes and so on and so forth. So I'm giving all these things, not because I want to say that I'm feeling nostalgic. Yes, sometimes I do, but that's not the point. What I'm trying to say is that we were really like, we really cheated the history, okay? I mean, what happened back then, this was such an upheaval. This was such a rapid development that I don't think that anything more progressive, despite I acknowledge, the dictatorship, the deficits of democracy, and political prisoners and so on and so forth. That all was there as well. But what I'm trying to say that despite these negative elements, which we don't like and which we don't advocate for, and we'd love to see socialism without that, despite that, it was still probably the most progressive thing that has ever happened in the history of Bulgaria. And then the other even more progressive thing was probably the development of Yugoslavia, which lasted for like more than nearly 70 years. Okay, and it was much more democratic and also better managed from the point of view of economy. But that's a different story. Okay, so we had this, right. And then in 1989, our dictator Todor Zhivkov, who's been in charge since early 60s, if I remember correctly. So, I mean, he's been one of the longest lasting dictators in that camp, because he ruled for like 35 years or something like that. And he was, first of all, he was widely appreciated, and he was also very aware of how things are in terms of global politics and in terms of what is going on in the Soviet Union. That's why, for example, in Bulgaria, unlike Romania, for example, we haven't really had any kind of problem with the transition of power or with the kind of once Todor Zhivkov figured out that things are falling apart in the Soviet Union, or that decision's been taken, then he just gave up. And he wasn't struggling, he wasn't fighting, because he knew that this is not a decision that is up to him, okay? And that things were decided somewhere else. So what happened is when Todor Zhivkov and his people were basically removed from power, then those who came to power, who took power basically, were the most demoralized elements from the Bulgarian Communist Party, which has been in crisis since, I would say, late 70s. Okay, it was already increasingly difficult to develop this kind of faith in the in the communist ideology or socialist ideology, whatever you want to call it, it was increasingly difficult because particularly since the oil crisis developed, like I think it was in 1974, it of course had its effect on our economies as well. So it was all getting more and more difficult, and people were just joining the party because of how the system worked. So if you wanted to have a position, you had to join the party, and then it developed a certain culture where people were not really, they didn't care about the ideology, they just wanted to make careers, right? And that was this 15 years, or I don't know, 10 years, well, more than a decade probably, of developing this new culture of careerists getting to the top of the party. And as I said, these were people who had no clear political orientation. They just wanted to get to power, and they just wanted to keep them. It was a moment for them, okay, in 1989, because the old guard had to be removed because of political PR reasons, whatever you want to call it. And they thought, okay, it's their chance. So they grabbed the state, they grabbed the money, and they did it not only, they couldn't do it alone, of course. So they used the law enforcement apparatus, which was very strong, as I said, in Bulgaria. The secret services in particular, the police, the prosecution, and so on and so forth. So it became a very pathological conglomeration, okay, of demoralized people from the party and people from the secret service, which, like by definition, most of them are demoralized. And to that, we have to add the general political culture of the Bulgarian elites, if you can really speak of elites, because I mean, what kind of elites can you really have if you're, I don't know, the second or the third generation wearing shoes? But that's a different topic, okay? But anyway, let's say we had some elites, and for the sake of argument, we had some elites, and they had this political culture, they had this culture of compradorism, or whatever I should call it, like the kind of, being ruled by someone, being subordinate to some center, to some metropolis, colonial mentality maybe. So these three factors came together, and they produced this particularly dangerous and malicious and pathological conglomeration, as I said. And what happened, what began in the early 90s was massive theft of everything that has been produced throughout the years, throughout the decades of the Socialist Republic. And this theft continues until today. I'm actually surprised. I mean, I feel like I have underestimated in many aspects the Bulgarian the People's Republic of Bulgaria, because I never thought that it actually produced so much for these 50 years of its existence that you can steal, that you can keep stealing until today, right?
There's still something left.
Yeah, so that there's still something, and there's quite a lot of left, actually. I mean, in terms of infrastructure, maybe not so much, but still, I mean, there are things that the oligarchy can feed itself from. So, like, this group of people, they transformed themselves in the conditions of capitalism, which in the conditions of market, free market, they transformed themselves into those who, consciously or not, mostly unconsciously, but we're actually in a position of performing this primitive accumulation, okay, of right. Capital, which was, of course, theft, as I explained, and privatization, and so on and so forth. But then, in the beginning, it was still, I would say, under the control of the old, as we like to call it, nomenclatura or partocracy, the kind of the top leadership of the party. And throughout the 90s, it was very difficult. That's true. And particularly in 1993, like there was literally nothing in the stores. I mean, we had no water, no electricity almost. Like I remember it, I lived there at the time. And the first years of capitalism were very, very drastic. Like I'm serious, like running water only from 6 to 9 in the morning, and then from 9 to 11 in the evening. I don't know, electricity pretty much the same, or maybe a little longer than that in terms of availability. Like massive cuts everywhere, like nothing worked, railways, public transportation, like air lines, it was really, really a visible disaster for everybody. And then, we ran out of bread at one moment, like there was nothing in stores. It was difficult to purchase groceries. It was really hospitals closing massively. That was a very bleak year, particularly in 1993. But still, it wasn't so bad, because until the, say, 1996, 1997, the old party, well, not the old guard, but those who like some remnants of the old guard plus the new guard, like the new kind of careerist people, they kind of kept it together in a way that they didn't let things totally fall apart, everything be privatized and so on and so forth. So that was, of course, unacceptable for the West. And what happened in 1997 is that they staged the first colorful revolution in Bulgaria. I mean, most people don't know that, but actually the first successful attempt was there in 1996, 1997. And from that moment on, the disaster received another, boost, momentum, okay, and it developed different, like entirely different dynamics, and everything was like the theft was there, but then from that moment, the theft became like they started stealing like it's their last, it's the last robbery,
Right.
and. That of course produced a lot of conflicts within the new oligarchy, especially that the run on the capital within the conditions of this peculiar primitive accumulation was very demanding. So that easily transformed itself. And again, I want to stress on that it by the force of the circumstances, it transformed itself into that, because many people think it's a conspiracy. That people conspired in order to then create these mafia structures and stuff like that, and probably there were some elements of conspiracy, but the entire process was not thought out or developed somewhere in someone's mind. It's just a natural development of a certain circumstances. I just don't quite see how it could have went any other way. That's why I feel that restoration of capitalism, the decision to restore capitalism in Bulgaria, and the fact that there was no one in the party to actually oppose it in a very serious manner, that was a crime against humanity, crime against the whatever, the Bulgarian society, if you like, and crime against international politics and progressive ideas, whatever. So it transformed itself into these separate gangs, and every gang has a general or some kind of capo di tutti capi and so on. So one of them was Boyko Borisov, okay, one of them, and he started out as a person. He had a position already because he was part of the, or maybe the most important actually person in the personal security of Todor Zhivkov. Okay, he was like his guard, maybe the main one, and of course that gave him like some kind of position. Of course, it was a technical position, but he was very close to the top person, to the person like number one in the Bulgarian politics. So he did have access. He knew people, so he organized his own gang. And there are rumors, of course, like rumors. Let's say people know that, but no one can really prove that because no one has really things like, I don't know, video footages or stuff like that. But what prevails in Bulgaria is the kind of knowledge that still, as I say, we can't prove that. Allegations, maybe I should say in that case, that, Boyko Borisov was the guy running, for example, the gangs that hijacked trucks in Bulgaria that were, entering from abroad and, I don't know, robbing them of goods and all kinds of stuff. Then, he was the one probably establishing the routes for all kinds of contrabanda and stuff like that. And his empire, his kingdom then, eventually turned itself into an empire. It was growing and growing and growing. And after, like at the beginning of the 21st century, now I can't say exactly what it was, 2002 or 2004, but somewhere around that time, he became also an important person in the Ministry of Interior, which is the most important ministry in Bulgaria, and that's like the Soviet inheritance, okay? Because like a dictatorship requires a very large apparatus.
Of course.
All right. So that's a very important place for him. That was a very important place for him to be, to develop his further, criminal activities and so on and so forth. And he did that successfully. And finally, because there was a lot of struggle, armed struggle between these gangs. In the 90s, we had like between 150 to up to 200, if I remember correctly. I mean, depending on the study, between 150 and 200 killings, including political killings, okay, in Bulgaria. So that was our transition to democracy, civil liberties, and whatever you want to call it. Boyko Borisov was also involved in that, like not directly shooting someone or being shot or something like this, but he was part of that world of that of that apparatus, okay, that eventually turned out to be running the state, okay,
Right.
and we have the facade. Okay, we have the parliament, we have, I don't know, the president, we have all the political institutions and stuff like that. But Bulgaria is a place where nothing which is public works. Nothing. Okay, and no one really even expects that any public institution is going to do their job anymore. Like, it's just so naive to expect that in it. And everybody knows that, like, the only person, well, not person, but the only corporation now that you can turn to if you want to do something which exceeds the everyday life of people, like, I don't know, go to grocery store, or, I don't know, go for vacation to the Black Sea coast or stuff like that. Like, if you want to do something more than that, then you have to discuss with the functionaries of the Boyko Borisov's party, which has been in charge for now, I don't know, 15 years or something like that. So, I mean, this gives you an idea, right? This speaks to how they have actually prevailed. Okay, in order to, they managed really to get to the top and to suppress other wings of the oligarchy, and to, of course, make friends with some of the leading people from the other wings that they managed to suppress. And this is a corporation now. Like, Boyko Borisov's party is a corporation. So, for example, to an extent that if you don't have a job and if you're in some kind of hopeless position, then before you're evicted from your home and before you become homeless or something like that, then your last hope is always to go to the local Boyko Borisov's party and tell them that you're in such a bad situation, and plead there for, like, I don't know, a week or something like that, and maybe eventually they're gonna find you a job where you're gonna, I don't know, clean something or whatever, I don't know, some kind of shitty job where you're gonna be paid like terrible money, like, I don't know, 200 euros a month or 250 euros or something like that, okay? And you're gonna have to be, eternally thankful to them for that.
Of course.
So it's, yeah, okay. So, I mean, we're talking about this kind of public order or disorder, whatever. Like, it's really a civilizational disaster. Okay, we've never been so bad. Like, this kind of blow that we've been experiencing for the last 30 years. I don't think it has any precedent in the modern. I mean, in the modern, I'm sure, but in the entire Bulgarian history, like dating back 1300 years. So, Boyko Borisov is now at the very top, and he's obviously, him being the prime minister of Bulgaria is his secondary thing. I mean, he has to be there in order to secure routes for trafficking narcotics, for trafficking people, for doing all kinds of business activity. Not only himself, of course. The word on the street is, again, I can't prove that, but I kind of tend to believe that, because I think it's absolutely credible that his main partner in crime is Erdogan's son, and they're doing all the kind of guns, prostitution, like what have you, right?
Right. Yeah.
So he's there, and this is the brief history, like simplified to the maximum, history of the Bulgarian oligarchy, which is now under the thumb of Boyko Borisov.
Right.
Who, of course, is not like, and I want to stress that he's not independent geopolitically, okay? It's not like he can do whatever he likes. It's that he has to, comply with all kinds of geopolitical elements, particularly the American embassy.
Right.
And he also has to take into consideration to some extent, okay, the kind of the public's attitude and the public's emotions and political feelings.
Right. Let's go into that and also the geopolitics first, but a quick recap then, just to make sure that I've understood it all correctly. So, first, Bulgaria starts off as sort of a petty kingdom and a feudal society, and then in the course of socialist transformation, industry grows, and there is sort of an unprecedented rise in the living standard of people.
That's true. And it's not only industry, it's also education. Like, we've built almost 200 educational facilities, including universities and schools and libraries throughout Bulgaria in the first 10 years of the socialist whatever system. Then, the expansion of the railway, building shipyards, everything. We really cheated the history. We managed to do something like 30, 40 years, we managed to develop to an extent that it took like Western societies 300 or 400 years. Okay.
Yeah, and that's this is amazing, and the agricultural numbers like bleh, sorry, top exporter for tomatoes and paprikas and all of, like yeah. So we got a huge amount of wealth created under the socialist system, and then however, Bulgaria is still subordinate very much to Moscow. Am I correct? Yes. So it is sort of a subordinate state in the Warsaw Pact and also the Soviet bloc. So once the bloc collapses, the nomenclature in place in Bulgaria sort of just finds a new master. So this.
On the one hand, yes. Although their first concern was actually how to make sure that they maintain in power.
Right.
So that was, and then the second thing was to look for a new master. And I don't think, again, it was like a conscious choice that they had to look for a new master.
Obviously.
Like their culture, their political culture is that they cannot really be independent. I think the last independent thing that Bulgaria has ever done in the modern history was back in the beginning of the 20th century, before the Second Balkan War, and that was pretty much the very like in 1912, if I remember correctly.
Right.
And that was it. Like from that moment on, there was no speak. There can be no speak really of any independent Bulgarian decisions. Although I must say, I must add here that I think that we were terribly subordinate to Moscow, but on the other hand, I think we were much more independent in some of our decisions, at least, including those. In terms of international politics, in terms of foreign policy, than we are now, because it happened quite a few times during the 70s, especially, that Bulgaria established economic links with France and with other Western countries, and then Brezhnev had to come and to cut the ties, like personally had to order that we cannot do that. Okay.
Yeah.
So.
I was coming to that.
It's unthinkable that anything like economic cooperation on producing cars, because that was the cooperation with France back in the 70s about producing Renaults, and then like anything like producing anything industrial, anything meaningful industrial as an initiative would be absolutely unthinkable without the permission of the American embassy, which we will never get, of course.
Yeah. So about the subordination, obviously there's not some sort of a grand plan where somebody goes like, we need to find a new master, but it's rather the material reality of socio-economic policies that, okay, we produce things for these markets and these people and from these resources, and we're allied with these people and so on and so forth. But so this whole situation creates a sort of a perfect storm for the nomenclatura to transform itself into this sort of an organized crime cliques, and then during the course of these 30 years or so, Borisov's clique or party gradually sort of climbs the ladder to achieve power, and not necessarily through democratic means, but through controlling the material realities, like, okay.
Yeah, but also through democratic means, because, I don't want to, I want to be intellectually and politically honest. On the one hand, of course, everything we said, it's true, and they do control the state, and they falsify the elections every once in a while. That's true. But, without some kind of general permission in the society for them to rule, that would have been impossible for them to feel that comfortable, okay, as they were for the last 15 years. So, people did vote for them, and at the beginning of their 15 years ago, Boyko Borisov was one of the he was viewed massively as one of the in chain of potential saviors of Bulgaria, because we had in 1989 or before 1989 we had this Todor Zhivkov, and everybody looked up to him for anything, right? And people even he had this nickname developed in the society. People call him Daddy with a very seriously, in a very kind of infantile way. Okay?
Right.
And unfortunately, this infantilism, I think, is also an important element to take into consideration when it comes to the Bulgarian political culture, because people like to neglect that, because people feel, and quite justifiably, that in the final aftermath, economy decides about things. That's true. But economy speaks in the economy is the last resort, really. Okay, before that you've got like a cascading construction of all kinds of elements which are very important in terms of determination of the current situation. And one of this is particularly the infantile political culture of the nation. Which just and again, I'm not trying to say that the nation is bad, or I don't know, that the political culture is somehow should be used as a derogatory argument, against Bulgarian society. It's just that throughout 140 years, if you're a deeply peripheral and feudal society, and as I said, we're like the third or the fourth generation wearing shoes, maybe, then it's very difficult to develop any kind of political culture that you would be able to uphold and kind of use as an important viable point of reference in your political choices. Okay, so yeah, I mean, I'm afraid we are infantile to a point, and we do have this tendency, massively speaking, okay, as a must in the society, to look up to people who are going to be our fathers or mothers of society.
Right.
So we had the daddy, then we had like other leading politicians, which I mean, I'm not going to even throw names because I would have to explain their history. And now we have this Boyko Borisov, who always was this, like he was looked up as like a strong man, someone who's going to be like the Bulgarian Putin maybe, or something like that. The difference is only the difference is only that Putin actually what Putin managed to do, and that's why he's going to stay forever in the Russian historiography, because he deserved his place there, regardless of what we think about his views, okay, political views and stuff, is that he managed to put the country together and to stop the pathological civilizational disaster that started back in after the dismantling of the Soviet Union in the early 90s. Whereas in the case of Bulgaria, these processes continue. So that's the main difference. So people had these hopes, and that's also an element why he was able to stay in power, and he was able to, for a long period of time, not anymore really. I think he's very tired already, and I think his regime is very, very used out. But he did make he has been making this impression that okay, it's difficult, but we're doing some minor steps here, minor steps there, and of course it was all a lie. But when you do it in an appealing manner, and when you control the entire media landscape, which he does through either directly or through his proxies like Delian Pevsky, which I also mentioned in the article, like the media mogul and an oligarch there. In Bulgaria we don't have, except for our website and maybe a couple of others, we don't really have an oppositional media. And you can see that. You can see that also in all kinds of ratings that international journalistic organizations do regularly. That Bulgaria is falling every year. Okay, we're somewhere behind 150th place in terms of media freedom and freedom of speech. So we had this, but now, as I said, it's ending. Like, Boyko Borisov is not credible anymore. I think Boyko Borisov is very tired. His regime is used out. And I dare say that, this model, it's finished. I mean, we see the end of it. It cannot continue anymore like this. I think they're going to be able, in terms of technically speaking, they're going to be able to steal for another maybe 10 years, and that's pretty much the maximum. And they received the boost in 2007 from the European Union because they started receiving these European funds. And it turned out to be just pocket money for the oligarchy. So they had this extra resource, this sort of artificial breathing for them, because you can imagine, I guess, based on everything I said so far, is that these people, we can speak about capitalist restoration because it was capitalist restoration, we did capitalist restoration, or we can speak about free market and capitalism in Bulgaria, which results in this disaster. But also we have to mention that one of the pathological elements of this capitalism is that these people that are in charge of the economy, these oligarchs and thieves and gangsters, they have no idea about economy. Like, once they stop stealing, once they have no resources to steal from anymore, they're just gonna, they're gonna go bankrupt, and they're no one beyond the Bulgarian border. Like, for a while, they thought in the beginning of the century that they're gonna be like the Russian oligarchs, that they're gonna be, received in London and Paris and everybody's going to love them, because especially if they speak about against Putin, because Putin is the devil now, right?
Yes.
So that no, Bulgaria is not Russia and has never been Russia, and has never had this kind of meaning, okay, in terms of geopolitical, in terms of geopolitics, or any kind of politics, really. So they are no one, and once the resources finish, they're just, I don't know what they're going to do. So the amount of wealth to still be stolen is shrinking, and also the regime, in terms of its infrastructure, the corporate party rule over every institution, and substituting party branches for every public institution in any region of Bulgaria. That's not going to work for any longer than maybe a decade more, and maybe even less than that. So that's hopeful. Okay, that's
Right.
really good, because something has to happen. Unfortunately, on the other hand, I got to say that I'm not really sure whether we can be very optimistic about it, because judging by the right-wing rampage in Europe, and not only in Europe, that's been going on for the last couple of years, I'm afraid that what's coming could be even worse than what we're witnessing right now, in a way that we could be just as poor and just as endure the same hardships, but there's going to be an ideological element to that, which is going to be this ultra-conservative, racist nonsense, right? And of course, everything is going to be geopolitically oriented towards the so-called Euro-Atlantic community, which means America is going to take the decisions regarding our foreign policy. So it's going to be absolutely, like it already is, but it could become even worse, absolutely pathological, because everything that is happening right now in Bulgaria is just so unnatural and so un-Bulgarian, if you like. And again, don't look, I'm not a patriot or anything like that. I'm just looking from I'm trying to present the Bulgarian point of view. Like, for example, Bulgaria belonging to NATO is just, a weird thing. Like, what does Bulgaria do there? Like, in what way is Bulgaria, like, let alone that it's not on the North Atlantic, okay? But what is Bulgaria doing there, in a way? Like, when have we actually, who has thought out this weird link between Bulgaria and the West? That West, like Bulgaria, all these countries, when you look, this kind of, I like to call it the Orthodox bow, which is when you go through, Russia, Belarus, Ukraine, Romania, Moldova, Bulgaria, Greece, to a large extent. Like, these are not the same countries as Germany, France, or Britain, or Finland, for that matter, okay? And by that, I'm not trying to say whether they are better or worse. They're just different. And they don't belong to NATO. When you look at this artificial Westernization of these societies, it's sometimes funny and absurd. It's like looking at for example, if you have a satellite TV, then you can go to and watch sometimes programs from places like Tajikistan or Central Asia, Kyrgyzia, or Arab countries, and you look how they try to interject and how they try to simulate Western shows, like Western talk shows, Western style, and it doesn't work because of how they're dressed, how everything is different, and it just looks so artificial. And politically speaking, we have the same in Bulgaria. Like, with Bulgaria belonging to NATO, okay, European Union is a different thing, but NATO, where we orient ourselves, particularly now, against Russia. I mean, Russia, which is a state that the Bulgarian society feels very strong brother, and justifiable, I want to say, okay, like very strong kind of emotional, historical, if you like, links of brotherhood. Now we're suddenly, Romanian army and Bulgarian army are kind of, alongside the American army. We're going to invade Russia or invade China? Yes. Or kind of thing. This is such a nonsense. Okay, this is just. This is and why is this happening? Because these people, the demoralized clique, the oligarchy, whatever you want to call them, the real leaders of the state, okay. And the real leaders, the owners of the state, the owners of the economy. That's why I used it in the article, in the title of the article, Mafia-Owned State. They are, they're going to sell their mother and their father for pennies to anyone who's going to guarantee that they can keep looting the country. That's it.
Right. That's shocking. And from the comments, let's pick up a comment. Because we have one, reminds me of the old Thatcher quote turned upside down. the problem with capitalist restoration is that you eventually run out of other people's money. So because you run out of other people's money, but yeah. Anyway, just to recap a bit about the period of restoration. So Borisov enjoyed some popular support because he sort of was presented as a savior from this bureaucratized nomenclatura that controls the people's lives. But ironically, so he seems to have become the very thing he sought to sort of fend off, because that's how you described that you need their permission for everything and the corporation controls it all. It sounds like how Americans describe communism, to be honest. It's like a dystopian version of what socialism is. So and that brings me to our next topic, which is Western capitalism and Western relations and geopolitics in general, because usually when we talk about capitalist restoration, it's all about restoring the free market and some sort of capitalist ideologues trying to make the economy market oriented. Say, look at Estonia, for example. I think it's a prime example of how sort of Reaganism has been implemented. But with Bulgaria, it seems paradoxically that there isn't any semblance of the free market. Like when I listen to you, I don't really see how and why Western powers like IMF or EU would align themselves with Bulgaria. I would understand if they were doing something like was done in Chile, like full on free market reforms. But if they're just looting, then like. Okay, I'm kind of falling apart here. But we got these two things you mentioned, like EU is a different thing, and then NATO. So let's first start about the EU and the economic sort of relations and alliances.
Right.
Is there movement for free market capitalism in Bulgaria?
Right. Well, there is no free move. There is no Okay, to start from the end. Okay, so
Right.
question of free market, liberal, democratic, or libertarian movement for rule of law and free market and so on and so forth. Yeah, we have that, but it's not a spontaneous one. Okay, like to a certain extent, I mean, there is some spontaneity in a way that there are some people which perceive themselves as the middle class. And what kind of middle class you can have in such a pauperized society? I mean, there are people who can just afford to go to a hypermarket every once in a while and fully stuff their trolley, and that's like or maybe they can go to Greece, okay, once a year, and of course they have to take a loan for that, but still they are able to pay it back. So that's our middle class. And of course, there are some elements in these middle class that they want to, they want this proper liberal democratic state. And personally, to me, like as a person who has been into politics for more than 25 years now, it's ridiculous. I mean, I don't understand how anyone can really be serious about their dream of liberal democratic status quo that we had like in the West in the 80s and 90s. I mean, I just don't see how it's going to come around. But okay, I mean, everybody is allowed to have their dreams and massive. And these people. Why am I saying it's not spontaneous? Because these people they were groomed, they were brought up by all kinds of. Because in the beginning of the 90s, we also had this invasion, this very strong ideological offensive of capitalism in Bulgaria, and that was facilitated by all kinds of NGOs. Like there's this mafia of Western NGOs, which I really despise. I want to say that, and I'm not talking here necessarily about Amnesty International or something like, or Human Rights Watch, but about people like America for Bulgaria, National Endowment for Democracy, all these kind of Atlantic Council,
Cato Institute and the like.
Right. Plus, also they have this. They have their own their proxies, which are a little deeper. Like you cannot trace the link directly to NATO, America, or whatever American imperialist organizations. Okay, so and we have like Institute for Market Reforms and Market Economy, which obviously, like everybody knows that. Okay, that like most of their money, and I think it's even official in their accounts that they have to publish every once in a while that they receive money from the West, like be it America or be it some organizations in the States or be it some organizations in the European Union, or directly from the American embassy in Bulgaria. So like all kinds of stuff. And these people, they created in the beginning of the 90s this false myth that now we're going to be, because that was part of the propaganda. People's Republic of Bulgaria, this was backward, bad and stuff, and now we're going to be modern. So that's the face of modernity in Eastern Europe. Okay, so they wanted to say that we have to break with the past and we have to become modern and we have to become like in the West, right? And everybody had this candy-coated idea of the West. Like the West was just like a lot of things, a lot of variety of things, everything colorful, neons, and I don't know, this kind of, but no unemployment, for example, no people struggling, no, I don't know, underpaid workers, and so on and so forth, right? Like, for example, I remember that a friend of mine told me, that was, I must have been 10 or 11 maybe, or I don't know, no, less than that. It was still back in the 80s. So I must have been like 7 maybe. Like I was in school, I remember that. And one of my classmates, they went abroad. I think it was like to France or Spain for some reason, because they're like this friend's dad was a high-ranking like top party bureaucrat, and like he was able to take a trip. I don't know whether it was like because of party duties or touristic one, or it doesn't matter. They went to Spain, and the guy came back and said he was so frightened because he saw homeless people there, and he didn't know what homelessness really means. So he was like very shocked that someone should help this man. Like, he was like this. Okay?
Yeah.
Okay. So this was the idea that people had about the West, that everything is fantastic and everything is modern and electronic and blah blah blah.
Yeah.
Anyway, so these NGOs, they kind of upheld this kind of view of the West, and they groomed and they brought up an entire generation of naive and not very, okay, I'm going to put it that way, slightly ignorant of the world, young people who are now in their 20s or 30s, and they really want, like, they want Bulgaria to be a normal state, like any other state, regardless of the fact that, when you look at state, like, I don't know, let's pick a state from Western Europe, like France, for example. I don't know what is normal about France anymore, considering what the brutal repression of the yellow vest that's been going on for the last 2 years. I mean, you really want that? I mean, we have that partially, okay? So
that kind of answers the question. The first part of the, I'm sorry for interjection, but just trying to also save time. But the first question, like, okay, did people want it? And I remember reading about that. That's kind of usual situation in the capitalist restoration in the Eastern Europe in general. Like, people did not expect homelessness or joblessness, unemployment for that matter. But what I want to know is you mentioned earlier how the Americans are prime supporters of Bulgaria, how everything seems to flow through the American embassy. But generally, one would assume that the Americans would have some sort of free market interest or something that benefits their own either market interests or straight up imperial interests. Like what do they get in return?
Well, what the Americans get is pretty simple. I don't know what the Europeans get from that. It's perhaps that the Europeans have to obey the Americans, and that's why it's all happening that easily. But because, my observation is that Europe, whatever, United Europe, European community, whatever you want to call it, has never jumped out of its like shorts towards America. Like they just keep being obedient since the Second World War. And
that's true.
But that's a different story. Now, what I want to say about the Americans is that, look, they benefit from that greatly, because for them, what matters is the territory. And we've seen now that it's forming, what is forming and what has been forming for the last couple of years, particularly since Trump came to power, was this trimarium or intermarium, this initiative of having cordons, having a sanitary cordon between Western Europe and Russia, which is going to spread exactly, you mentioned Estonia, from Tallinn to Athens, or to, at least to Sofia, okay? And of course, the main facilitator of that has been appointed Poland, which is now, particularly with this Catholic fundamentalist nationalist government, is sort of perceiving itself as some kind of antemurali, Christianitas and of Europe as well,
right?
And of civilization and stuff. So they gladly do that, and this is something that Bulgaria is absolutely needed for, because I think Bulgaria, from the point of view of territory, is very important. it's a strategic place. It's in the very center of the Balkans, and they already have the Kosovo, which is, it's not really a state. People officially speaking, it's a state, but it's just a military base and a facilitating institution or maybe a structure of institutions for international crime. So it perfectly fits there. Like, right, here's Bulgaria, which is like also a country facilitating, which where the top politician is facilitating international crime, and there we've got Kosovo, and then this sanitary cordon. It's very important from the point of view of like that's one. Sorry, I was going to say that this is just one of the things, one of the aspects for which Bulgaria is very important as a territory. Okay. For the Americans. Also, it's a question of the Black Sea, particularly since the annexation of Crimea. It's very important because they hoped what the Americans hoped. One of their hopes, okay, when they with this coup in Ukraine, was that they're actually going to get Crimea and they're going to establish a NATO base there. And it's just that it was like absolutely impossible for Russia to accept that. Same as it's going to be impossible for them to accept any kind of coup d'etat in Belarus, regardless of what we think about whatever Putin, Lukashenko, and stuff like that in terms of whatever their political views, conservatism, and so on and so forth. It's just a question of naked geopolitical analysis. I mean, when you look at it, do you really feel that anyone in Moscow, be it Putin or anyone else, is going to ever agree to the Russian border be on Smolensk and be surrounded by hostile states like Ukraine? I think their gravest mistake was Ukraine. And again, as I say, coming back to to your question, like they hoped for that Crimean base, they didn't get that, so all the more Bulgaria matters from that point of view. Okay, and I think that from the point of view of the capital benefit, the benefits of the capital corporate profit. Corporate profit, it's that it's a military industrial complex because we have to now buy American planes and we have to take huge credits and stuff like that. And because I said earlier that Boyko Borisov is very tired. Actually, he dared once saying somewhere on a European Union panel or whatever, European Parliament public hearing or something like that, he's really tired because he sort of allowed himself to say publicly that the topic of the panel was corruption, because when you speak about Bulgaria and Romania, it's always corruption. So he finally he lost it, and he said something like, corruption? You want to speak about corruption? Well, how about you come to Bulgaria and spend with me a couple of days, so you will see how many times the American ambassador phones me up every day in order for me to buy his planes. That's corruption. Okay. And I was like, really tired. Okay.
Oh, yeah.
And that happened already a couple of years ago. So yeah, we do have that. We're buying this, and we're not even buying new planes. Okay, it's like second or third hand planes, like from Portugal, from I can't remember where from, but it's planes that we obviously don't need, and planes that have no meaning from any point of military security, if you like, military security point of view. In a way, like, okay, we're gonna have 5 or 10 or even 15, maybe F-16s. So what? How does it actually make us safer, and safer from whom? Of course, like we have to allege that it makes us safer from Russia, because Russia is, as the propaganda goes, is somehow trying to, I don't know, rebuild the Warsaw Pact or something like that. So we have to be very careful about it. And these American miracle weapons, like from, I don't know, 20 or 30 years ago, technology like F-16s, this is what's supposed to keep us safe. So yeah, they do benefit from that, from having Bulgaria in their sphere of influence directly. And of course, if we had any kind of sovereignty, we could have still be in that sphere of influence, but we could have at least cut some deals. Okay, like if you look at Turkey, for example, despite the fact that they are in NATO and that they are perceived as part of the Western world, that's again a mistake. But they are there, and they have a very strong army, and they can still, make their business with Russia. They can make their business with America. They can make their business, and they always ask to be paid up front. And I would say that we could have asked pretty much the same, or Poland for that matter. We could have, because when you look at the American foreign policy and the history of the American foreign policy, then one thing that the Americans don't understand is diplomacy. They just have no idea what it is, but they understand corruption very well. So if you ask them for money, they just take out their checks and start writing. It's just, the mentality and the political culture of our elites, in inverted commas, Okay, in Poland, in Eastern Europe, in Bulgaria, Romania, it's that we just subordinate ourselves and we hope that we don't get kicked in the end. And of course, like if you do it that way, and if you demonstrate weakness, and of course you're going to be kicked, and not only by your master, but that by everyone who's passing by.
Right. That explains the Americans. So geopolitical interests and heavily NATO interests. So speaking of money flowing from one hand to another, let's talk about the EU. So you mentioned before that the EU subsidies and basically support money flows to the pockets of the Bulgarian oligarchy. And in the article you wrote, it also says that the agricultural subsidies in particular are quite heavily corrupted. You mentioned something about, was it 5 families pocketing basically all the money? So, and you also mentioned that the EU, which is obvious that the EU must know about this. So, it is so to sum up, the EU spends millions and millions upon years giving money to Bulgaria, which obviously goes to the oligarchy. The EU knows about this, yet does nothing about it, or they've just done something about it. They had this discussion. We'll go to it a bit later. But first of all, can I have your thoughts on the thing? What is EU's deal? Why are they doing this?
That's a very good question, because I've been asking myself that for the last, I don't know how many years now, for the last 10 or 12 years since Bulgaria was accepted in the European Union. Now, one thing that we for sure know, and that's also been actually stated publicly during the hearing on the 5th of October in the European Parliament, because for the first time now, finally, someone, took up the question of the Bulgarian disaster there, and that was mostly because there was quite a lot of police violence during these demonstrations, particularly like in the late summer. Okay, like about a month ago. Yeah, like particularly in September. So that was finally brought to the attention of the Euro MPs. And a few politicians, they actually stated it. They said it's because Angela Merkel likes Boyko Borisov. We, the Bulgarians, have to endure these hardships, and they have to endure this regime, and they have to endure this corruption, and they have to endure this, civilizational disaster. Okay, they didn't use the phrase civilizational disaster. I don't think many of them really are aware of what's going on in Bulgaria. They might have looked up some statistics in the Eurostat or on the Eurostat's webpage, but which are frightening. Okay, if you look at it, you will just see that we have fallen into some kind of abyss of the third world. But that doesn't give you, like, the statistics, they don't give you the entire picture. You have to go there and see it for yourself, like the disaster, the human destruction, the destruction of the infrastructure, of everything, like literally in Sofia even, which is like a European capital. We've got streets in the center that have no lighting. Okay, it's
You also mentioned how almost 3 million people have left the country.
Oh yeah. That's yeah. Thanks for bringing that up. Like, since 2007, about 3 million people have departed from the country. Officially speaking, the statistics are that we are now in a nation of 6 million people. Back in the day, in the 80s and late 80s, early 90s, we were still about nearly 10 million. We never really managed to become a 10 million society, but that was the goal, that was the plan, that was like the development was going towards, that was one of the goals of the development. And then the changes came, and what happened is like 3 million people have suddenly, well, not suddenly, it was a process, okay, left the country, but we're talking about 1/3 of the society. And I think that it could have been even more, because we're talking about official statistics here. And I don't know anyone in Bulgaria who wouldn't have their friend or family abroad, okay, working abroad as a migrant worker. And I don't know anyone who would know anyone, okay, that doesn't have anyone again abroad. So I think it's a terrible demographic disaster. We're approaching the point of no return, in a way that these changes, if nothing changes in the coming 5 to 10 years, the Bulgarian nation, if you like, it's just going to start ceasing to exist, in a way that we're going to lose the capacity to reproduce, the nation, the society as it is. So that normally happens when there's war, okay, and we had no war. We had no war. I mean, not a single shot was fired except for the 200 killings that I mentioned, between the mafia thugs in Sofia and other urban centers throughout Bulgaria in the 90s. But in general, like in terms of like any military action, war, we haven't had that. So, this is one of the results, maybe one of the most symbolic results of the actual, of the restoration of capitalism in Bulgaria, because we're not talking about immigration here. 3 million people, 1/3 of the society. That's exodus, okay? That's like in the Bible, if you like, okay? So, and of course, who moved first? I mean, the people who had the biggest capacity, intellectual, scientific, cultural, those who were able to confront the new reality abroad without fearing. So they just went there once the markets opened up. And of course, like for the European Union or whatever, for the European capitalists, if you like, that was, of course, that was great because they received, a whole set of highly qualified workforce. They were able to pay maybe 50% of what they would have had to pay, like, I don't know, its German equivalent or French equivalent or British equivalent or Finnish equivalent for that matter. So people who were prepared to work for less because they've never in their life saw, money that I don't know, German professor or engineer or specialist would normally earn before the migration started. So there was this wave of social dumping in the West. And at the same time, they first took out our specialists and they employed them, to reproduce their the mechanisms of their capitalisms and to reproduce their capitalist structure, the capitalist economy. Now with the help of the Bulgarian highly qualified Bulgarian and not only, of course, other Eastern European countries as well, specialists. But that was phase one, and then phase two was sucking out all those people who were reluctant to go, but they had no choice. And whom did they become? And that's the most massive emigration. Whom did they become? They clean in hotels, they clean in care homes, they clean in trains, take care of the infrastructure, construction sites. So what is the role that the European Union, that the West has designed for us? Is for us to be their servants, for us to take care of their elderly people, for us to clean in their luxury hotels, after their parties and stuff like that. That's the role that the West has designed for the East. And, I think that it's so obvious now, not only when you look at Bulgaria, but in many other countries, it's so obvious that to praise the West and to preach Western culture and to preach Western values, including European values, this cliche that I don't know what it means. We joke in Bulgaria, what do you do with European values? Do you eat them for breakfast or for supper? Right. So it's like, to preach that and to be Western fanatically oriented person, you really got to be out of your mind, because like these are, the Western regimes, the Western advanced capitalist regimes are our enemy. And now European Union is facilitating that process of the hostile takeover of our minds, of our economy, and so on and so forth, or destruction of the economy for that matter, so that they don't have competition. So all these things. And now, look, again, I don't know what Boyko Borisov does for Angela Merkel, who is the top bureaucrat, like at least one of the most powerful bureaucrats in Western Europe and in the European Union. I don't know how did they develop this cozy relationship. I don't know how she benefits from that. I know that it's only thanks to her blessing that he's still in place. Because, of course, if I know that 80% of the subsidies for the European subsidies for the Bulgarian agriculture are stolen by 5 families, if you know that now, then surely they know that as well, right?
Yeah.
So you got to be one has to be really naive to think that it's all just an internal thing. By the way, I think it's one of the elements of the infantile characteristics of the Bulgarian politics. Like many people in Bulgaria think that it's all, it's our fault because, we can't organize our state properly. And that's partially true. We don't have much of an experience in organizing our state properly, whatever it means. Our tradition, in terms of modern Bulgarian state is rather that an external factor installs an order in Bulgaria. But what I'm trying to say is that, look, of course, I mean, we do have certain problems. And obviously, I don't want to deny these problems. We do have, the kind of, like, we're not helping ourselves. That's what I'm trying to say, okay? We're not helping ourselves with what we're doing, the way we perceive politics, the way we approach them, the way we look at Boyko Borisov, the way we look at the world also. And this is the problem that, like, I think 80%, or I don't know, maybe 75, like, I don't know, I don't want to argue about the mathematics of the thing, but to a large extent, the proportion is such that to a large extent, the fate of Bulgarian people, the fate of the society there, the fate of Bulgarian politics, of the shape of its internal political process is really a function of decisions taken somewhere else.
Yes, European
plays a huge role in this.
Yeah, that's really a hallmark of colonization or colonialism in general. So, if we if we compare it to the other processes of colonialism, we'll notice that there are similar things happening here. So, like looting of resources and then cheap workforce and so on and so forth. If I were cynical, I'd say that's exactly what the EU gets. It gets Bulgaria as a colony, but of course,
but they've extracted these resources. So I'm just wondering, like, okay, because it all happened, okay, the first wave, the second wave of emigration or exodus, whatever. So now I would have expected, and I gotta say, I was one of the naive people, okay, in 2007 when Bulgaria was joining, and not only Bulgaria, like Bulgaria, Romania, and I think Croatia at the time, they were joining the EU. I was thinking to myself, okay, now this chaos gotta end because like no one can cope with it. This is just such a pathology, and I was so naive. And I'm really thinking back that how strong, like on one hand, how strong the pro-European propaganda was, but on the other hand, how difficult the situation was, how desperate we were, like in order to think that entering the European Union is now going to suddenly fix all the problems, or maybe not fix all the problems, but at least help fixing them. And what it turned out to be is like joining the European Union is another nail in our coffin, okay?
Right.
Because we opened up the economy, which, by the way, I gotta say it's pretty symbolic, and maybe our viewers find it funny. It was difficult in the beginning for the international companies to actually enter Bulgaria after the European Union sort of enforced this opened economy, liberalized economy on Bulgaria, because the local mafia, okay, they have already developed their chain of supermarkets, for example. So we had this chain of supermarkets all over Bulgaria called Piccadilly, and it was only there. And it was like the wing of the mafia that ruled in Varna, which is one of the most important cities in Bulgaria on the Black Sea coast. So, and the consortium, this mafia consortium is called TIM. And it stands like, the abbreviation is the letters of the three men ruling it. Okay, the first letters of the names. Okay, so they have this mafia consortium, and they ran this chain of stores, Piccadilly. It was pretty expensive, but it was so popular, everybody would go there. And then, when chains like Lidl or Aldi or Carrefour, when they wanted to enter, or Tesco, when they wanted to enter Bulgaria, then the mafia didn't allow them because they wanted to profit on that. And finally, they had to, they had to move. Sort of, they had to complain to the European Court, to the European Commission, to the European whatever, I don't know. And of course, because they are powerful capital groups, they made the European Commission do something in their favor. So yeah, now we have Lidl, now we have Tesco, now we have Carrefour, we have Billas and all the rest of it. But it's like, it's a funny thing. And of course, why did I say that these people, when they're thrown into conditions of free market competition, they will not last 5 minutes. What happened with Piccadilly? They went bankrupt, like within 10 months or something, just because they are not able to manage it, okay, within the situation of competition. They just wanted to have like this free thing, like, okay, we've got a market of 6 million people and they got to buy from us, because where else are you going to go? Unless, I don't know, you live in the country and you can grow your own tomatoes and cucumbers and so on and so forth. So that's one thing. But on the other hand, just to finish the thought on this, like this team, this group, gangster group from Varna, they also own the airlines in Bulgaria. Okay, the Bulgarian airlines that were destroyed, we had very strong fleet called Balkan, the state-owned airlines in the 80s and 90s, and that was privatized in the beginning of the century, and it went bankrupt, okay? And now we've got like 5 or 6 or 7 planes or something like that. And for example, they don't pay their airport fees nowhere in Bulgaria. They fly around Bulgaria and never pay. And just, the debt piles up. And the police, the prosecution, everybody's silent about it.
And everybody knows that at the same time. So this is the situation, okay? Like, we've got some mafia thugs running the state-owned, well, not state-owned anymore, but formerly state-owned now, the national air carrier of Bulgaria, not paying their airport fees because they can.
Yeah. Why would you if you
exactly.
can get away with it? Yeah, that's but that's exactly the thing. Like they seem to be allying with free market capitalists, but not even playing by their rules. So it's kind of peculiar that they get some special treatment. On the other hand, if you look at the history of colonialism, this is exactly how it goes. Like Europe sort of preaches free markets, but actually denies the very methods that made it itself prosperous. But anyway, let's not take too much of our time with this, and let's move on. We have a couple of questions in the chat, but before we go into those, because they are a good closure for this discussion, we have another stream coming up, so we need to cut this short.
Sure.
So let's talk about the EU in the sense that they held this debate on the 5th of October. And on the 8th of October, they adopted a resolution condemning the lack of rule of law in Bulgaria. So tell us a little bit about that process and how is it going, and is there anything to be expected from this?
Well, the expectations are high, as you know, because people are eager for something to change. And, they are prepared to place their hopes into anything that comes at hand. In a way that, look, I don't quite expect much from the European Union, because they would have had to have a premise for doing something against this. And since they are benefiting, it's a win-win situation. Somehow Angela Merkel and the top bureaucrats in the European Union, I don't know, being Juncker or Verhofstadt or whoever, they benefit from how the situation in Bulgaria, how things in Bulgaria have unfolded. And Boyko Borisov and his clique and whatever, the rest of the oligarchy, they can also benefit from it, because they can keep looting the country and, and everything's fine for them. It's only for us. For the 6 million people that remained in Bulgaria, okay, excluding me really, because I'm based in Poland, although I travel there every month. And I have Bulgarian citizenship, and I greatly care for how things are going on there. It's just that, look, I don't expect much, because I've seen the European Union being a teethless dog. I've seen them barking against Orban in Hungary. I've seen them barking against Kaczynski in Warsaw, in Poland. And nothing happens. So it's a dog that barks a lot. And, the Arab saying goes, the dogs are barking, therefore the caravan is moving. So the caravan is moving, and I expect some barking. But the problem is that in the case of Bulgaria, the barking is even ineffective. Really, because when you look at this, I read the entire resolution, and I don't think the resolution is good, and I don't think the resolution is really going to help anyone in Bulgaria. Not because it's wrong, okay? Not because anything there is wrong. It's just because everything is so European, Western kind of, human rights, civic liberties stuff. Like it's just so Western that it doesn't fit to Bulgaria in any way. In a way, look, again, I want my position to be clear. I stand for all civic liberties, and I cherish them greatly. And I think human rights are super important. But look, in one resolution where people are fighting for their survival, instead of focusing on this, on the mafia regime that has been exploiting the society for the last 30 years, what they're doing now is they're throwing rule of law, again, a cliche. Who knows what rule? Can you define rule of law for me? Okay. So like this cliche rule of law, and then they put everything there, like, suppression of LGBT, racism, Istanbul Convention, and everything is there. And all these things, they are so divisive for the Bulgarian society, like they are for any society in Eastern Europe, not because, like the West alleges, because these societies are somehow conservative and backward. That's not true. We're not conservative and backward in many respects. It's just that this particular thing has never been part of the public discourse for the last, 100 years, okay? And it's just something new, and that most of the people in places like Bulgaria or Russia, they automatically, I'm not saying it's good, but that's what's happening, automatically associate that with liberalism, with everything that happened in the economies of these countries for the last 30 years, which is a great disaster, and that, some of the countries like Russia are barely recovering from it, but others aren't, like Bulgaria, for example. So, like, to throw all these things in the resolution where people are fighting for the actual survival of the nation, to make sure that the Istanbul Convention, which is of course important, to make sure that the LGBT rights, which of course per se in of themselves are important, to make sure that they are also there, just to make sure that we pack it up. Like, if we want to help the Bulgarians, then we're only going to help them under the condition that all other, all other obsessions of the West, current obsessions, particularly identity politics is one of them, that they have to be there, because otherwise, no, there's no help. Only if we can use the opportunity as a leverage against, this alleged Eastern European conservatism or backwardness. So,
Right.
I don't. That's why I don't like it. And again, I can't stress enough. I stand for all civic liberties, freedoms for the LGBT people, for anyone, okay, who wants. Everybody should be treated equally, should have all the rights, and they should not be discriminated against and stuff like that. Absolutely, yes. But is this the right moment to take it up? I mean, is this really the moment to discuss, to sort of inject into a resolution that is, supposed to support the people struggling for survival in Bulgaria right now? Is it really the moment to speak about the Istanbul Convention and the LGBT rights? And I want to ask the straight question here: whom does this help? Do you think it helps the people like myself who actually advocate for the Istanbul Convention to be ratified by Bulgaria? Do you think it helps me in any way?
Yeah.
No, it doesn't, because
Yeah.
it just gives arguments it equips our enemies with arguments. You see, what the West wants to do is that they want, by dictatorial measures, they want to impose it on us. Okay,
Right.
so this is what I really care to say about the question of the resolution. So look, I don't think that the resolution itself is going to help. What I think and what I hope for is that some of the Euro MPs, Bulgarian Euro MPs, they belong to oppositional parties, to the one of Boyko Borisov, okay, to the Boyko Borisov's party, and I think they are, by sort of putting themselves out there by trying to press Boyko Borisov on an international arena. I think they put themselves in danger. Okay, because we're talking about mafia here. We're talking about thugs. We're talking about gangs. We're talking about organized crime running the country. So, I'm not necessarily implying that they're going to be killed or something like that. But what I'm trying to say is that they can put themselves in severe trouble, and they know that, and they take that risk. So they will definitely be pressing further in order to, make sure that someone stands behind them. Okay, that they have some leverage against Boyko Borisov when he strikes back at them. So I think that there's going to be much more pressure from their side and from the side of the Bulgarian society, if you like, on the European bureaucracy in order to do something. Okay, and also Angela Merkel, she's going to go soon. So I don't know if her successor is going to like Boyko Borisov as well. So changes are coming, and also there's going to be this pressure. By the force of the circumstances, there's going to be this pressure, which is going to be larger than the case of Hungary and Poland, in my opinion. But again, it's my speculation. I don't know whether it's and maybe that's going to bring about some kind of reaction, which is going to be a more solid one, or at least more efficient one, because not necessarily in terms of institutions or in terms of whatever structures, but they're going to do something more effective towards Bulgaria or than they have done towards Poland and Hungary. So that's one thing. Second thing is, as I said, Angela Merkel is going. And third thing is that the European Union has been in crisis for the last, I don't know how many years now, okay? And I'm not talking only about Brexit, I'm talking about Eurozone, I'm talking about Greece, I'm talking about all these problems that this project is facing right now, all the contradictions that were long ago predicted by the international and European left in particular. So all this is playing itself out right now, and I think that changes are coming. And as I said, changes are coming in Bulgaria, changes are coming in the EU, and changes are coming in the world. Okay, because when you look at what's going on in America, I'm actually expecting things to go to some American politics to go to some very dark place. Because I'm with this announcements that Trump isn't going to give up, isn't going to agree to a peaceful transition of power I mean, that's something that's, that's huge. I mean, that means that they are really at each other's throats now in America. I mean, the establishment there. So there are some major geopolitical changes coming, and there are, whole series of wars, probably, like the one in Azerbaijan, in Armenia, actually, where Azerbaijan attacked it. We have COVID-19. We have all these things, and there is going to be some. What we have to expect is major changes in pretty much unexpected directions. So, my hope really is there. My hope is that something's going to happen. Okay. And we, left activists, the active minority in Bulgaria, and not only in Bulgaria, in Poland for that matter as well, we're going to be prepared, hopefully, at least to an extent, to take an advantage of the situations that are going to be opening up one after another. And as I say, generally, I'm not very optimistic, but I really, if I have any hope, and I'm against preaching hope, particularly preaching false hope, this cozy picture that everything's going to be okay finally. No, it's not going to be okay. We're probably, burning down our planet actually actively. And we've got we're running out of time. I've got 2 children, right, and I don't know what kind of world they're going to live in. But what I'm trying to say is still, in this process of rottening, we might find some space, some room for our activity, and maybe win over at least something.
That's an astute hope, I think we should have some solace in the Gramsci quote. It goes something along the optimism of the will, pessimism of the intelligence.
Right.
But yeah. So we're kind of running.
Yeah, we're running out of time. There are some questions.
I'll ask the question from the chat right now. So there's one question which you kind of answered just now. So it goes, so what's the way out for Bulgaria? What's a small nation to do?
Well, the only way, if we think, if we leave aside what I just said, okay, about the geopolitical changes in the world, which we might use, which would be an opportunity for us, potentially, possibly, then the other thing that, I'm a classical Marxist, okay, so I definitely feel that the viable perspective for change is the kind of revolutionary upheaval or revolutionary mobilization in a way that involves organized labor. And, that would be the perfect scenario. That would, if we had, the trade unions, coming together, and as weak as they are, they can still put the country to a stoppage. And I wish it would have been a viable perspective, but I know it's not, because most of the trade unions, unfortunately, are forced. Again, not because, the bureaucracy is so bad and corrupt. Okay, I mean, probably the bureaucracy isn't so great and it might be corrupt to an extent, but it's because they have no other way to operate. They have to succumb to that culture, and they have to work with the corporation run by Boyko Borisov. I believe that the corruption is really emerging, again, by the force of the circumstances. In a way, if you're a local union leader, and you, say you want to run a business, okay, then you are going to only run that business with the allowance of the local party, Boyko Borisov's party branch, and and they will even help you, okay. They could even facilitate, they could find you some clients and stuff like that. But your responsibility is to keep the class balance in order. In a way, no strikes, no protests, nothing. Okay, and of course, in a situation like the Bulgarian one, you're going to do that. I condemn that, but I understand why it's happening. It's like, if someone's drunk and they throw up in front of their main entrance to their staircase in their block. I don't like that. I think it's unacceptable, but it happens, and I understand why it does. So it's pretty much the same here. So I wish it had been a viable. Perspective, but I don't think it is. At least not at the moment. But again, I'm gonna say this again. There are changes coming globally, and maybe, just maybe, our cadres, left activists, the what I like to call the active minority, we might try and use some of them. And again, I don't think we can use that just totally alone. I mean, there are going to be many factors, geopolitical, international factors, but we have to play with it, okay? Because the left has this kind of view, they have to be pure, no contacts with the labor bureaucracy, no contacts with powers that be, no contacts with bureaucrats, because we are something else. We just recruit ourselves from the working class. The working class is pure and clean, and we're just going to do politics by ourselves and with ourselves. That's of course impossible, and that's an infantile view that led to a lot of sectarianism and a lot of opportunism on the other hand as well. So I think we gotta be prepared to do something. I mean, we gotta be prepared to work with international factors that are going to try and take benefit and benefit from the changes that are going to occur in Bulgaria as well.
Right. That's an excellent point, because what I got away from this interview is that the way that basically Borisov came to power is by taking use of this upheaval. We have a corrupt bureaucracy, and then people are against it, and then there's sort of a momentum, the social and political momentum, and then person emerges to kind of steer that momentum into a direction. So what we as leftists and working class activists need to be able to do is respond to that upheaval. So yeah, and that's valuable advice, and let's hope we can actually do that. So the last question is, what is the way forward for the protest movement? And I would like you to elaborate a bit on their tactics as well. What are they doing? Are they just out on the streets, or are they blocking the streets?
Yeah, they are on the streets blocking the main traffic, conjunctions and stuff. So I don't think there's any way forward anymore. I think they've just look, they can keep protesting, like the people there out in the streets in Sofia and other cities in Bulgaria. They can keep protesting, and they can benefit from the tiredness of the regime. Perhaps I was actually hoping they're gonna topple the government, and it's only they would have done that because I remember how Borisov was panicked in the beginning. He was absolutely totally freaked out. Like, for example, Donald Trump likes Twitter. Our prime minister likes Facebook. So he would go live in the middle of the night, or I don't know, early, like late evening. He would make live sessions on Facebook, trying to convince people in some very clumsy manner, because he's, apart from everything, he's also a very robust, backward, uneducated man. Okay, just a gangster. So he can't even, put like properly 2 or 3 sentences in Bulgarian together, let alone in any other language. So he actually admits that, okay, in one of the recordings that were leaked. He's dumb. Okay, so he was panicked, and it's only that after his consultation with the American embassy, that I think they tapped him on the arm and they said, like, okay, you're gonna survive that. I think again, like it's my speculation, but then he went there and then he became very confident suddenly. Okay,
right.
And I think that it's like he was initially scared because they are not used to anyone confronting them, and it is a major, massive confrontation. But someone tapped them on the arm, like someone in the American embassy. I don't think it even was the American ambassador. Probably was the 5th, whatever, press secretary in the embassy that was just available at that moment. And he said, "Oh, come on. I mean, you can just send the police and stuff." And he did send the police afterwards. And there were these violent episodes. But and that was also pretty shocking for everybody, because, like, again, Bulgaria doesn't have a tradition of mass protests, and all the more it doesn't have the tradition of police violence against them, right? So it was all very bizarre, very strange, and I think that people are now sort of hoping that things are going to change, and my hope would be things are going to change again by the force of the circumstances. So I think that most of the protesting people are hoping for the regime to add to the tiredness of the regime, and maybe finally they're going to resign. They're also expecting, some support from Rumen Radev, who is the president of Bulgaria, and who's one of the few honest politicians. Okay, I wrote about his figure extensively in the article. Again, regardless of what we think about his whatever political views, some of them I agree with, some of them I don't agree with. Still, he's the closest to the what we could refer to as an honest politician in Bulgaria. And he doesn't have a party. He's not part of any oligarchy, and so on and so forth. But he's alone. Okay, he's just trying to confront that alone, and I don't think he can get very far without any. Okay, he's got like the popular support, but he doesn't have any institution. He doesn't have any party. He doesn't have any structure. So I think that he just helps, sort of as a point of reference. He helps people keep mobilized. And also, I place some hope in these European Union shenanigans that I explained, that they might, give some effect. And every time something is going to happen, then it's going to be again, a boost of morale for the people that are out in the streets. But I don't think they can do anything much than being there and continue upholding their two main postulates, which is resignation of the prime minister and resignation of the attorney general. Of course, like if I were, a dictator of a committee, I don't know, the protesting committee or something, then I would probably come up with some tactics or strategies which are not being applied because it's a very spontaneous thing, pretty leaderless, which is also a problem, I think, because again, I'm not an anarchist, so I think leaders are useful in certain situations, I think that some things could have been implemented, some tactics or strategies. But again, who am I, to go and advise these people? Like, I live a relatively comfortable life in Poland. I've been living that for the last 25 years here. I'm not in a position to advise them. Like, I know many people in the Bulgarian left who take part in the protests. And, they are doing all kinds of things, okay, that are possible within the limits of spontaneity and leaderless protest. So I don't think there's any way to just directly refer to the question. I don't think there's any way forward. There's a way to keep running around in circles until something happens, and then maybe we can strike. Yeah, that would be my answer.
All right, we'll keep on then being prepared patiently, and I'm sorry about that. We're running out of time. It would have been nice to talk more about the working class perspective on the protests and also Radev. So I'm just going to ask a question that where can we further follow the events in Bulgaria?
Okay, so look, we've got a website which is dedicated mostly to Eastern European affairs, and it brings you the kind of left perspective, including certain nuances that the West doesn't know about Eastern Europe, and they do exist. And the website is called thebarricade.online, so you will easily find it in the internet. We're trying to cover things as extensively as possible. There are some, there's just a given amount of things that you can do with a limited amount of resources. So, you will find our financial appeal there as well. We're trying to collect money in order to, keep paying people, because we're a professional media outlet. Okay, it's important for everybody to know we pay we properly employ our journalists. We cover their security, their social security and healthcare fund, and so on and so forth. So, it takes a lot to translate, to edit, to, put out, and so on and so forth. So yeah, please go to that site and donate occasionally if you have an opportunity, or subscribe with like 10 euros or 20 euros or whatever you can afford in order for us to develop this activity. And we're covering that. Plus, we're covering a lot of other hopefully interesting topics from Eastern Europe and around the world. So please go there, thebarricade.online.
Yeah. Thank you very much, Boyan Stanislavski, for being here today with us. And we hope to hearing from you again. That was not English, that sentence. Yeah, and I think we should do another update in a month or so, because if the situation unfolds, I would very much like to hear more from you, because this has been very enlightening. And again, I thank you very much for being here. But
thank you.
Yeah, now unfortunately we have to move on, because the next guest of today has already arrived. So I thank you, and I wish you all the good in the world, and strength in your struggle. Red salute, comrade.
Stay healthy, take care, and keep fighting.
Yeah, you too.
Ciao.
Ciao. Okei, tervetuloa Hanna-Mili. Mä teen sen verran nopeasti, että mä vaihdan pätkäsen tämän striimin ja vaihdan meidät kokonaan uuteen striimiin.